Welcome to the MLB Early Bird Podcast for the Friday, August the 14th slate. Of course, I am Jason. That is Adam. We are sponsored by Yahoo. Man, I appreciate time as always, man. How's things been, man?
Pretty good. Really enjoying having all the sports going on. DFS basically from the time I wake up until the time I go to sleep. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I haven't been playing much NBA this week because I just don't know who's going to be playing all game long.
Yeah, I was talking about it with Josh earlier. Like, there's a bigger edge this time of year than any other time of the year, but there's also so much randomness. So, like if you had this type of setting for the entire season, all the good players would just make so much money. But with it being like a week and a half, 2 weeks long, you still have to get pretty lucky over that sample to make money. So it can be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to mention here, obviously saying that we'll talk about the Cardinals a little later on, but it's going to be kind of interesting if they do play this weekend. They just called up their number one prospect in Dylan Carlson.
Outfielder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally kind of forgot the Cardinals were a team.
I don't think anyone could blame you.
Yeah, just gotten so used to not talking about them at all.
I think we're going to be more surprised if they actually play tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure.
At this point. I mean, but of course, 15 total games tomorrow, 13 games a part of the main slate. We got, the Nats and Orioles are going to have the continuation of their game, plus they got the game after that. That's not a part of the DK main slate. Strasburg and Malone going for that one. Now, the 6:37 game between the Rays and the Blue Jays, that'll be a part of the FanDuel all-day slate. We're going to get into that too momentarily, but of course, I'll let you know today's show is sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the most trusted name in fantasy sports. Yahoo DFS now includes CSV upload and CSV edit features for those looking to play multiple lineups. Claim up to $30 in Yahoo Sports reward points by signing up and using the promo code Awesemo. Make better choices. Choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. Of course, we can talk about that Rays matchup against the Blue Jays, part of the FanDuel all-day slate. As we do this show, the Rays have not come out and said who's going to be the starting pitcher. The Blue Jays will be seeing Tanner Roark on the mound as 1-1 with a 5.63 ERA, 6 Ks, and this game is in Buffalo.
Yeah, not too appealing from the pitching standpoint. Obviously, like you said, we don't know who's going for Tampa, but Tanner Roark, on a full slate where you have 13 or 14 games, facing a Tampa team that's a pretty decent offense, just not enough strikeout stuff, I don't think, for Tanner Roark. So not really on the pitching here. I have respect for Roark as well. We'll have to wait and see kind of how the stadium in Buffalo plays. I know the fences are relatively short by major league standards, but it seems, I think I remember reading that basically like the predominant wind there blows in, so the ball doesn't carry quite as much as you would expect. And it typically at AAA, I think, played pretty neutral. So we'll have to see how that actually goes, but not really looking to pitching.
As you kind of head into all these games that are happening in Buffalo, is it more of like you're at that point now of let me see how this park plays before I kind of take a real deep dive in investing into the Blue Jays or who they're playing?
I think I'm basically treating it. There was a good thread from Derek Carty on Twitter that he dug into it. I think in July when it seemed like that's where they're going to play. And if I remember correctly, his assumption was basically that it's going to be mostly neutral. And, until we have data that changes that's kind of how you have to project it. I agree with that. Obviously you want to still be projecting this game as best you can. And with the available information, it seems like it's a pretty neutral park. If it turns out that it's extremely favorable for hitters at the major league level, then, obviously you change your projections. But for now, you kind of just have to go with the assumptions you have.
And looking at the main slate that starts at 7:05, up first we got the Mets and the Phillies. Jake DeGrom scheduled to go for the Mets. Phillies have not announced who they're going to go with. First up on Jacob DeGrom, I think I was probably like a lot of people on Sunday that had him as he's got that blister, like I want to say second or third inning, whatever it was. And you're all kind of like, oh no. And the MLB notes on this said that he planned to file off the blister between starts and doesn't consider it an issue. Do you think this is an issue for DFS players?
I don't think it's an issue. It scares me just as someone who's played baseball and had blister issues. I know how they can kind of just keep coming back even as you get rid of them. So it's obviously a little bit concerning, but it's not going to change the way that I attack DeGrom. He's obviously a really, really good pitcher. His fastball velocity is even up this year, making him potentially even better. Not the best park for pitchers in Philly, And the Phillies lineup, of course, has some pretty good hitters in it. DeGrom also is expensive, but if you can get to Jacob DeGrom, there's no real reason not to.
Is there a favorite bat you have in either one of these lineups?
Depends who's pitching for Philly. I'm guessing, or I can almost guarantee my favorite bet will come from the Mets side, considering DeGrom's pitching for the Mets. Just looking at the pricing, though, Brandon Nimmo is still 3,400. I don't really know what's going on with his pricing on DraftKings, but if he's at the top of the order, he's going to be a really good value.
DeGrom at 11.6 on DraftKings. Is it starting, especially with the blister? Does that concern you? Paying up that much for him?
Yes, because to an extent, it definitely will depend on ownership, because when you start getting to a salary that high, you start getting the same roster construction as everyone else that rosters him, basically. And you also have a game in Coors Field here. So you're going to have expensive bats you want to get to there. You have, 26 offenses on the slate. So there's going to be value bats that you can use to get to DeGrom. It's just a matter of, are you able to effectively differentiate without sacrificing too much upside? Just scrolling through the slate, there are some pretty solid mid-range pitching options as well. So I think from a tournament standpoint, it's relatively likely I end up not getting to a ton of DeGrom. In cash games, it's obviously different because you just love the floor that he brings.
Yeah, he's the highest salary pitcher on the slate. The second highest is Garrett Cole going for the Yankees up against the Red Sox. The Red Sox have not announced who they're going to go with. Of course, we all know how great Garrett Cole has been this year. 3-0, 3.22 ERA, 26 Ks. He's recorded double-digit strikeouts for the first time as a Yankee in his last start, striking out 10 Rays in 4 2/3. And obviously he's going to be a guy that people are going to look at as well.
Yeah, definitely. And he's just below DeGrom. If you're paying up to that price range, all things equal. So if ownership is the same and it doesn't really cost you anything to get to DeGrom, I think I would give him the slight edge. I think he's the better pitcher than Cole, especially there's at least some reason for concern, not concern, but some reason to expect Cole to drop off a little bit from his Houston days. For one, you don't know exactly what was going on with that team. I tend to think that like the widespread cheating obviously affected the hitting more than the pitching, but they did also have basically every pitcher they brought over suddenly become the best they've ever been. But on top of that, you do get a downgrade with like Gary Sanchez catching for the Yankees compared to who they had in Houston. So I do think it's a slight downgrade just in general for Cole. And the strikeout numbers, while they have been good this year, they're not quite to the level that they were last year. So, splitting hairs between him and DeGrom, but all things equal, I would look to DeGrom. That being said, if you're giving up anything for that $600, or if ownership is favoring DeGrom, I have no issue going to Cole. The Red Sox have been one of the most undisciplined teams in the league as far as swinging at pitches out of the zone, swinging and missing. They're missing Benintendi, who's someone that'll put the ball in play. So it does set up as a good matchup for Cole.
Are the Red Sox one of your more notable surprises this year of just how bad, they're 6-13 here on Thursday night.
Yeah, it's surprising. You didn't expect them to be as good as they have been in the past. Obviously, their pitching is really thin, and they're missing. They lost Mookie Betts, obviously, but I think it has been surprising, especially on the offensive side. When you look at this lineup, the bottom's not very good, but when you look at the middle of the order, it's still some pretty potent bats in there, and it seems like a team that you wouldn't really want to target against. But they, like I said, they've been pretty much across the board in all categories. They're not walking. They're striking out a ton. They're swinging at pitches out of the zone. They're swinging a ton in general. It's just been really bad across the board.
Is there an under-the-radar bat in this game that's, from a salary perspective that is kind of intriguing to you?
Not that jumps out right now, again, not knowing who's going for Boston, but the Yankees are finally priced up. You have Aaron Judge, who may or may not be in the lineup, but he's at 6,200, which is, Mike Trout levels of salary. But even LeMahieu now is up over 5K. Aaron Hicks and Luke Voit are in the mid 4K range. There's no like Brandon Nimmo type value bat that is sitting at the top of the Yankees lineup like you had in that Mets game.
In terms of the Red Sox, I think I've talked with you about this, Terry about this, with JD Martinez. He is priced at 4,600 on DK. Is he at all someone that hey, I'll have some shares of him just because if he can't get the home run?
I wouldn't expect to, just because there's so many. There's 26 teams to pick hitters from here, and going up against Garrett Cole is such a low probability, proposition. And then on top of that, Martinez is an outfielder. It's not like he's particularly cheap. So there's opportunity cost to the position. There's actual costs for his salary. I'd be surprised. And with there being 26 pitchers on the slate, Cole most likely won't have an extreme amount of ownership. So you don't even really get the leverage there by saying, oh, well, I beat 40% of the field if the Red Sox have a good game. So I think it'll be really tough because of the slate size to get to JD.
Then we got the Braves in Miami taking on the Marlins. Kyle Wright going for the Braves. Pablo Lopez going for the Marlins. Of course, was announced by the Braves. Acuna's going to be out for this series. Kind of how does that affect your outlook for the Braves heading into the series?
It obviously waters down their lineup a lot. It's their best, or arguably their best hitter. It's still a potent lineup. They did kind of trade off some strikeouts for some power this year, basically replacing Inciarte in the lineup with Marcell Ozuna. Now you'll probably have Inciarte back because of Acuna being out. But it's still a pretty potent lineup. There are some more strikeouts, though, with Austin Riley and with Ozuna. So if you have the right pitcher going up against them, you can pick on them a little bit more than you could in the past. But I'm not really sure Pablo Lopez is that guy.
Yeah, Lopez 0-3 with a 3.54 ERA in his 5 starts against the Braves.
ERA is not bad.
You're trying to emphasize the positives.
Yeah. I mean, just not a high strikeout guy. Going back to last year, 23% to righties, 19% to lefties. It's not the best spot. I mean, if the best argument I can make for Pablo Lopez would be that there is the game in Coors. You are going to be trying to find some cheap pitching that works out, and there are some strikeouts in Atlanta's lineup. They actually do have a relatively low implied run total right now at 4.4 as well. So take that for whatever it's worth.
Marlins obviously have been a little bit of a surprise this year. I mean, obviously the storyline with them was coronavirus early on, but now 8-4 after 12 games they've played. Any bats in their lineup that you like?
Jonathan VR is always an interesting play because, like on DraftKings, he has shortstop outfield eligibility, so you can play him in a bunch of different spots. He's got speed and some power, so there's multiple ways for him to hit his ceiling. Kyle Wright's mediocre. It's not a very good park for hitting, which is the biggest issue here. Corey Dickerson looks okay as well. There's nothing that really jumps out to me from the Miami side, though.
Then we got the Indians and the Tigers. Nova going for the Tigers. Savelli going for the Indians. Aaron at 9,300. Is he a guy that people should be looking at if they don't want to jump up and take a DeGrom? They don't want to take a Garrett Cole. Is he kind of that next options that people should be looking at?
I think he's overpriced here. It's kind of tough because he started out this season really well as far as the strikeouts go. He struck out 30% of righties, 32% of lefties. It's kind of come out of nowhere. Last year, he struck out 26% of lefties, 16.5% of righties. He doesn't really have the pedigree to be this great strikeout pitcher. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of it. The swinging strike numbers to lefties have been exceptional this year. To righties, it's below average at only 8.7%. So until I find some reason why his numbers have changed, my assumption is that he's just going to come kind of barreling back to earth eventually. And so it's not a really appealing price point. The Tigers, even though they have started out the year well, they're an offense that I think you can look to take pitchers against. It's just on this particular slate, if I'm going to pitchers that aren't top tier, that aren't Cole or DeGrom level quality, I want to get out of that upper price range because I need to make up for it with bats. I don't really want to be playing similar lineups as far as bats go and choosing Aaron Savali while other people are sacrificing one bat and getting to Garrett Cole.
Obviously, when you look at the slate on DK, the Indians' bats are the top bats for several. You got to scroll down a little bit to get to the Tigers. Are the Indians a team that you're looking at as a potential stack?
Yeah, Ivan Nova has been around for a while. He's a pitcher that doesn't miss bats really whatsoever, especially left-handed bats he'll allow power to. Typically does an okay job at limiting it to righties, but against lefties since last year, a 203 ISO, only a 13.5% strikeout percentage. And so you have Jose Ramirez, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Santana, all with power from the left side. And then, to round out a stack, Cesar Hernandez, Franmil Reyes obviously has a lot of power despite striking out so much. So it's a team that has a lot of left-handed power, which is nice. They have some bats toward the bottom of the order. They're cheap, so you could actually stack this team and get to good pitching, which is obviously beneficial as well. So yeah, I would expect them to be a popular stack.
Then we got the Pirates and the Reds. Chad Cole going for the Pirates, and Sonny Gray going for the Reds. Sonny Gray, 3-1, 2.25 ERA, 35 Ks. He is coming off a loss Sunday in Milwaukee. Chad Cole 0-0 with a 2 ERA and 12 Ks.
Yeah, Sonny Gray's kind of been my boy for a couple of years, and this is the second slate that he's been the second DFS slate he's been on. I didn't really get to roster him the first time, so I'm excited for it here. Pittsburgh, obviously, monster game last night, but still one of the weaker lineups in baseball. And Sonny Gray has really good stuff. He can strike guys out at a high clip. It's carried over this year so far. But since the start of last year, 30.5% strikeouts to righties, 29.3 to lefties. He does a good job of keeping the ball in the park as well, below a 135 ISO to both sides of the plate since last year. The salary is expensive, but he's another one where, I said with Aaron Savali that I didn't want to go to this price range for kind of a lower tier pitcher. If I do go to this price range, it would be for someone like Sonny Gray, who, while he's obviously not as good as Garrett Cole or Jacob deGrom, he is, I think, a much better pitcher than like an Aaron Savali, and he does have the talent to go out there and give you those 30-plus fantasy point games.
Is there anything on the Pirates bats that sticks out to you?
No, the park is good for hitting. That's about all that there is to say. It looks like there might be some weather issues here too. So there's a chance, even if, obviously there's the potential for rain, but also you tend to see balls carry better in the hitting conditions because of the humidity. So that would be, I guess, a boost for hitting in this game in general. But I just have a lot of respect for Sonny Gray.
Of course, baseball is back, and get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for MLB DFS with an Awesemo Plus MLB Weekly Pass for $15.95. This includes full access to Awesemo's leading player projections, ownership projections, and the all-new Top Pitchers tool and more. Get your pass today. Go to awesemo.com/join to get that MLB Weekly Pass now. Next up, we got the Royals and the Twins. Jake Odorizzi going for the Twins, and Jacob Junis going for the Royals.
Yeah, Odorizzi and Junis, two guys that give up some power. They can get some strikeouts. It's obviously a much more favorable matchup for Jake Odorizzi going against the Royals. Only a 4.2 implied run total for Kansas City. Odorizzi, since last year, he kind of fixed the reverse splits issues he used to have. He used to give up, he used to really get lit up by righties and was pretty good against lefties. Still gives up power to righties with a 204 expected ISO since last year, but the strikeout percentage came up to 25.5%. So he at least has that strikeout upside, 28% against lefties. So I do have some interest in Odorizzi. Again, he's in that price range with Gray. If the weather cooperates for Gray, I'd rather go there. But, pairing Gray and Odorizzi, for example, I think would be a perfectly viable idea. For Junis, it's a pretty scary spot for a pitcher that he has a good slider, but he doesn't really have anything else to get strikeouts with. His fastball is below average, and he gives up a ton of power. Now you're facing this Minnesota team that doesn't really strike out and does have a ton of power. It sets up, actually, I think, to be a really good spot for mini stacks or full stacks from the Twins.
Odorizzi only going 3 innings in his season debut after coming back from the injury. At his price point, does that concern you about rostering him?
Yeah, because like you said, you are paying up. So you would, at that price, you kind of want everything to be perfect for him. He threw 71 pitches his last time out, so you're assuming he probably can get to like 85. That, I guess, would be on a slate this big, that's enough to knock him back to where it's probably kind of tough to get to him.
Is the Twins, they're always a team I'm looking at stacked just because of the bats that are in that lineup, and I know that obviously everyone's looking at that the stack there. Are they at a top stack for you on Friday?
Yeah, Jake Junis, just gives up tons of power. 254 expected ISO to righties since last year, 187 expected ISO to lefties. And even with Josh Donaldson injured, there's all kinds of power in this lineup. It seems like Byron Buxton maybe is finally figuring it out. Former top prospect, former number 1 overall pick, been hurt for years, but he's showing, power at the plate. You have Sano, Garver, Rosario, Cruz, Polanco, Kepler. Like the whole lineup just has tons of power, basically with the exception of Luis Arias, who just he hits well, he just doesn't have power. So I think for a pitcher like Junis that gives up power, it's a really bad spot. And for a team like the Twins, there's tons of home run upside.
Anything on the Royals that, obviously Sal Perez is always going to be someone people are going to be looking at, but is there anybody else that we should be paying attention to?
Hunter Dozier as a cheap one-off, if he's sitting in the middle of the order, he's only 3,400 on DraftKings. I mentioned the strikeout stuff for Odorizzi getting better, and Dozier does strike out, but Dozier also has some power, and Odorizzi does still give it up to righties. So he could be the kind of guy where in large field tournaments, you just get to him as a one-off. Nobody has him. He doubles and homers, and it ends up working out really well.
I mentioned about the Cardinals earlier. They're taking on the White Sox. Adam Wainwright scheduled to be on the mound for the Cardinals. If the Cardinals play, this will be their 6th game of the season. White Sox have not officially announced who they're going to go with. Now, if Dylan Carlson, the number 1 prospect, is in the lineup, DK has him priced at 3,300.
Yeah, they've been slow on the prospect pricing this year. So that would be the kind of guy that you can go to for value. Obviously, he's going to be more expensive. Once he starts getting regular at bats, you would expect. So certainly a value guy you can look to, as long as whoever's pitching for the White Sox isn't like Giolito, basically.
You have to imagine if they're calling up their number 1 prospect, he's got to be in the lineup.
You would think so, yeah. I mean, typically when you see them come up, they play at least, at least in most games. Like with Joe Adell with the Angels, he's kind of part of an outfield platoon now, but he's still getting the majority of the starts, because why would you call them up I mean, I guess this year it's a little different because they're not missing minor league games, but still to call them up to start the service clock and all of that, you expect them to play.
And look, and if you're a type of player that you're putting your lineup in early and you may not be able to get to it as the day goes on, I feel like when it comes to the Cardinals and this entire game, it's got to be buyer beware.
Yeah, so is it that they're planning on playing, but they need like one more day of negative tests?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, because I was looking right before we started the show, they are scheduled to play. I mean, of course, they were supposed to play today. That didn't happen.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's got to be a buyer beware. Like, you have to be paying attention all day long to see kind of what the status is.
Right. So I wonder if it'll end up being a situation like we had with the Marlins last week, where they were scheduled to play at like 7:05 in Baltimore. And then at like 6, they're like, okay, the game's being pushed back. We're still waiting on tests. They ended up playing at like 8. But yeah, pay attention.
Yeah, I will tell you, I was watching Hard Knocks last night, and COVID tests didn't look too bad, what those guys were going through.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but
it wasn't the whole nose like going to the brain. It was just kind of going in and swabbing for like 10 seconds, which feels like it's the longest 10 seconds of your life.
Right. Yeah. Haven't done the COVID one, but I've gotten enough like flu swabs. I know that it's not fun.
I haven't got the COVID test done, but I know obviously I'll have to be taking one here very shortly, since I do work a part of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers broadcasting crew. So I know that COVID test is coming. I'm just waiting for the phone call and say, "Hey, you need to come to the facility to get this test done." I just don't want the whole poking the brain thing. Like that doesn't look comfortable.
Right, exactly. Just something a little bit more convenient than that.
Yeah, I know that like there's an instant blood test, but obviously they can't do blood tests every day to see where you're at.
Right.
But yeah, that the whole going up the nose thing, man. No, I am. That is something I definitely am not looking forward to. Then we got the Brewers and the Cubs. Brandon Woodruff going for the Brewers, and Tyler Chatwood going for the Cubbies.
Tyler Chatwood looked like he turned a corner at the end of last year, beginning of this year. Everyone started to pile onto him, and then he just got absolutely lit up in his last start. I don't think I don't know. I'll be interested to see where the ownership comes in. I don't fully believe in him. I do think he's made improvements. The big thing with Chatwood is that he used to not be able to throw strikes, and even in his last start, he got lit up, but he was throwing. So he didn't walk guys. He just got destroyed on batted balls. But the strikeouts have been better. The walks are down. I think that he has improved. He's not, he's still not an ace, but this Milwaukee lineup's not very good right now. You basically have Christian Yelich and then a bunch of guys that strike out. Even Keston Hiura, who is good, who's one of Milwaukee's top prospects, has a 30% strikeout percentage. So there are a ton of strikeouts in this lineup. If, for example, Sonny Gray's game is really does have weather concerns as we get closer to lock. We talked about Odorizzi having concerns because of the pitch count. Maybe you do start getting to some Chatwood just because of the strikeouts that Milwaukee offers. It's not someone that I would be starting my lineups with, but if I build a lineup that I like and I end up in that $9,100 range, I wouldn't necessarily rebuild my entire lineup. I would probably just put Chatwood in.
Yeah, Chatwood went against the Brewers on July 26th, 6 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts in that game. Of course, Chris Bryant's got the left sore wrist. Obviously got to pay attention to that. See if he's not in the lineup, who's going to replace him in the lineup.
Yeah, he was a late scratch yesterday, so definitely keep an eye on that. If he's out, it's an even better spot for Woodruff, who keeps being like a mid-range pitcher on DraftKings despite having really good strikeout stuff. He's someone that I roster most slates, and I assume that'll be the case again here because he's at a price point where you can pair him with a lot of different guys and get different roster constructions. Like you can pair him with one of the aces on the slate and still get to some decent bats. You can pair him with another mid-range arm and get to most of the bats that you want. And you're not, well, it's not a great matchup against the Cubs. It's not a terrible one either. And you're talking about a pitcher that has close to a 30% strikeout percentage against hitters from both sides of the plate. So you're not sacrificing a whole lot of upside in terms of strikeouts. He's affordable. He gets a ton of ground balls as well. So balls in play typically don't do damage against him. I think Woodruff will be a good pitching option here.
You mentioned earlier in the show about we got a game at Coors Field, and that's, of course, the Rockies taking on the Rangers. Lance Lynn going for the Rangers. And on the Rocky side, you got Ryan Castellini, who it looks like, potentially 75 pitch range could be after going 60 in a season debut. Obviously, it's always about the bats at Coors, but in terms of the pitching, I guess more on the Lance Lynn side, does that interest you at all?
Not a ton. I mean, somewhat because the Rockies are not the best team. They kind of have half a lineup, like half the lineup scary, and then the other half probably shouldn't be in the major leagues. And Lance Lynn is obviously a good pitcher. His salary's down a little bit for Coors. If he were like 8K, I would start to really consider it. 9K, I probably I would rather take my chances on Brandon Woodruff at 8,200, I think, than go to Lance Lynn and Coors at 9K. So that'll make it tough. But he is at least a good enough pitcher where it's easy to see how this game doesn't, or at least the Rocky side of this game doesn't quite go off like you would expect Coors games to.
Obviously, you got, Story 6,200, Arenado 6,000, Blackman 6,000. But, then you start looking at some of those Texas bats, Joey Gallo at 5,400, Odor at 5,100, Frazier 5K. I guess talk about the Rangers bats. First off, is there one of those top bats that you prefer over the others?
Joey Gallo, just always Joey Gallo. Texas as a whole has been just a ridiculously bad offense this year. And I don't think they're as bad at, going forward as they have been, because at least the top part of this order is average to slightly above average. Gallo is really good. Chu's good. Solak and Calhoun are both pretty average bats. But then it starts to drop off. Frazier and Odor do still have some power. Chirinos has power, but these guys all will strike out quite a bit as well. But Gallo is the one that really stands out, especially Castellani. He in the minor leagues didn't have really good strikeout stuff. He may have better strikeout stuff now than he did then. There was an article that I found prior to his first start that said that he made changes in the Arizona Fall League, I guess 2 falls ago, and then his strikeout numbers went way up. He started to carry it over to AAA last year and got hurt. And then, so we haven't really gotten to see exactly what he is now. But, the assumption, even if you assume his strikeout stuff is better, the assumption is still that he's not a great pitcher by any means, and that Joey Gallo would have the advantage here.
In terms of those top 3 bats for the Rocky Story, Arenado and Blackman, does one of those bats stick out above the others?
Blackman, just because he has the platoon advantage. Lynn has gotten much better against lefties than he used to be, but he's still nowhere near as dominant as he is against righties. He struck out 22.5% of lefties since the start of last year compared to 35.5% of righties. Doesn't allow much power to either side, but one of the things that makes Coors such a great hitter's park, in addition to the ball flying, is that the outfield is just so big that putting the ball in play, you get more hits in general. Singles turn into doubles, doubles turn into triples. So the fact that Blackman has a much better chance to put the ball in play than Arenado or Story do against Lynn gives him the advantage.
When we were here last Thursday night doing the show, we talked about the Mariners and having a 5K pitcher. He's back here on the mound at 5,500, taking on the Astros and Valdez, who is at 8,800.
Yeah, really tough matchup for Yusei Kikuchi, who struggled his last time out as well. His velocity's up this year. He has a cutter that he hadn't thrown before. So I am optimistic about him, at least compared to what I used to think of him, because I figured out pretty quickly last year that I thought he was one of the worst starting pitchers in baseball. So I think he's better now than he was. Still not someone that you're really going to be looking to go to all that much against Houston. At 5,500, maybe gets into some lineups in large field tournaments just because of there being a game in Coors Field, and there not really being other strong pitching options down in that price range. But it's not a high probability play. You're not going to feel very confident, nor should you feel very confident in rostering him against all these Houston right-handed bats.
Valdez, 19 strikeouts and 17 and 2/3 innings, and only has 3 walks. Is he someone you could look at as potentially there being some strikeouts in that Mariners lineup?
I think he's just a little more expensive than I would like. The strikeout stuff has been pretty good this year, but he doesn't really have a track record of that. In the minors, he wasn't a really high K guy. He hasn't really been since in his limited time in the majors. A lot of right-handed bats for Seattle, some power, Kyle Lewis in particular, and Austin Nola behind the plate. But overall, I think it's just someone where if Valdez were in that like $7,200, $7,300 range, I'd have some interest. But at $8,800, I think you're just walking a pretty fine line and needing a lot of things to go right.
Astros a favorite stack for you?
Yeah, I like them a lot because, Kikuchi, like I said, he's better, but I'm still not convinced that he's like a shutdown pitcher now. And while you can say what you want about what you expect from the Astros, minus the technology this year, they still have a ton of very good hitters. It's not like these guys didn't have ridiculously good pedigrees and that they were only hitting well because they cheated. They're still really good hitters. It's still a really, really tough spot for Kikuchi.
Yeah, Joe Kelly had another great quote today. I forget the exact quote, but he had basically another great quote about the Astros being cheaters. Then we got the Padres and D-backs. Lamet going for the Padres and Kelly for the D-backs.
Yeah, Nelson Lamet, another guy in this 9K range that it's not the best matchup because the Diamondbacks do have just pretty solid hitters throughout their lineup and not a ton of Ks. But Lamet himself has really, really good strikeout stuff. He, in his last start, he threw 83 pitches. So he's thrown at least 80 pitches in all 4 starts. 91 was his max on July 30th, his second start of the season. So, if you're expecting around 90 pitches, but has really good strikeout stuff. 8, 7, 2, and 11 strikeouts in his 4 starts this year. This will be his 3rd start against Arizona, which, maybe is a little bit of a concern, but 2 very good starts against them already with 8 and 11 strikeouts. He's around a 30% strikeout pitcher throughout his career. So at 9,200, I think it's another pitcher kind of like Sonny Gray where, he's not on the same talent level as DeGrom or Cole, but from a strikeout upside standpoint, he's in the same ballpark and you're saving some money.
Great note on the MLB app about Lamet. His slider is producing a 48% whiff rate and opponents are hitting just 118 against it.
Yeah, it's a really nasty pitch for him.
In terms of the hitters in this game, obviously Tatis is always going to be someone people are going to be looking at. It's always going to be highly priced. But do you have a favorite bat in this game?
Yeah, I like right-handed power in general against Merrill Kelly, who has allowed a 234 expected ISO to righties this year, 242 since the start of last year. So Tatis is, obviously the first one that jumps out, off to a great start this year. But Manny Machado, $1,200 less expensive than Tatis on DraftKings. Not sure that he should be that much less expensive. So he looks like a good value. Tommy Pham is a pretty solid outfield value as well.
Then we got the Dodgers and the Angels. Clayton Kershaw going for the Dodgers. Patrick Sandoval going for the Angels. 10,600 for Clayton Kershaw. Obviously, has not produced some numbers that maybe some people had liked to this point. Did get an extra day of rest, though, heading into this one.
Yeah, I think it'll be tough to get to him on this particular slate. I think Kershaw is still a good pitcher. He's obviously not as good as he used to be. But the thing that makes it tough here is just that he's, $400 less expensive than Cole. And he obviously doesn't come with the same type of strikeout upside that Cole does. Same goes for Jacob deGrom. And then Kershaw's more expensive than guys that have better strikeout stuff like Lamet, like Sonny Gray. And in DFS, obviously, the easiest path to upside is strikeouts. So I think it's just kind of a dead price point for Kershaw where it'll be tough to get to him. That probably keeps his ownership down. But I think with it being such a big slate, you won't really have trouble differentiating without being too suboptimal. So I don't really have a whole lot of interest in Kershaw. On top of that, it's not like it's a great lineup for him. I mean, you're talking about going up against Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon, David Fletcher, a low strikeout guy, as is Pujols. So it's a tough lineup to rack up points against in general anyway.
Do the Angels bats intrigue you?
They're more expensive than I would like. They'd be interesting if they were priced down for Kershaw, but you're not really getting a discount on Rendon. Trout's still almost $6,000. So no, not really.
Any value bats in this game?
AJ Pollock's 3,400 in the righty-lefty matchup against Patrick Sandoval. Pollock, obviously, he's a good hitter. He's hurt a lot, but right now he's healthy. So I think that looks like a pretty good price point. Chris Taylor is cheap as well. So most of the Dodgers are priced up, but Pollock and Taylor look like good values.
When you talk about Pollock's health, it just makes me think of how many times I have had him in a season-long fantasy league, and yeah.
Yeah, I don't play a lot of season long, but when I do, I always end up with Pollock because he falls because no one wants to take the health risk, and because he's good, and so I just end up taking him, and then I realize why nobody else wanted him.
You just realize he's going to be in that DL spot before you know it.
Exactly. He always starts off good enough too, where you're just like, man, I got a steal on AJ Pollock, and then out for 3 months.
And then he's round third heading home, and then something happens.
Yep, exactly.
The final game on the slate is the Athletics and the Giants. Frankie Montas going for the A's, and Johnny Cueto for the Giants.
I'd expect Montas to be one of the more popular pitchers on this slate. Pitching in the best pitchers park in baseball in San Francisco, facing a Giants lineup that's not very good. Several guys in the Giants lineup are banged up as well, so we'll have to, there's a chance to get a little bit of a watered down lineup there. Montas has good stuff. He's kind of at this point in his career never put it all together quite yet, but it's there. He throws, like a 97 mile an hour sinker. He gets some swings and misses, has good strikeout stuff, 28% strikeout percentage to lefties since last year because he throws his splitter 25% of the time and gets a lot of swings and misses on it. 23.5% to righties. Doesn't have that same level of strikeout pitch against them, but still has average to above average strikeout stuff. The salary is good at 8,400. The park, like I mentioned, is great. So I think Montas will be probably one of my more heavily owned pitchers and one of the more popular pitchers on the slate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. 8,400. He's got to be a popular, pitcher that people are going to look to go to.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it in tournaments where you're trying to get upside, if you go Frankie Montas and then just rotate through the guys, basically if you just rotate combinations of Frankie Montas, Sonny Gray, Nelson Lamet, and then a couple of other guys, you're spending 17 to 18K on pitching. You're going to get to the bats that you want, and you're not really sacrificing ceiling because all these guys have such high ceilings.
Of course, football is right around the corner, and we here at Awesemo are excited to bring you our inaugural season-long fantasy football and best ball draft kit using the same tools that have helped make Alex Awesemo Baker the #1 daily fantasy sports player. We've compiled a package that will revolutionize the way you prepare for fantasy football drafts. For $29.95, our draft kit includes everything you need to prep, including rankings, projections, sleeper tools, loads of content from our experts, and the Draft Wingman, which will update your team projections in real time based on who you have already drafted. And as an added bonus, new members of the FFPC, your home for pay-to-play season-long fantasy football leagues and contests, get a $35 credit when they sign up for an Awesemo draft kit, which basically makes it free. Don't miss it. Dominate your fantasy and best ball leagues today. Of course, coming up on Friday, the MLB Strategy Show will be myself and Greg at 11 a.m. And then at 6 p.m., I'll be joined by Jeff and Terry for Live Before Lock. Before we get out of here, is there anything that you believe people need to be paying attention to as we head into Friday's slate?
The big thing, obviously, is just that we're missing five starting pitchers or something like that right now. So, while I feel like right now you kind of see the slate pretty clearly, and I have a good idea of how I would attack tournaments if they were starting right now. Depending on who's pitching, it can completely change the entire slate, obviously. So that would be the first thing to keep an eye on and pay attention to the strategy show in the morning for, I guess, hopefully up-to-date pitching.
Yeah, we hope so. I hope so when I start my morning that when I put my sheet together, I'm going to know who's starting in those matchups. Of course, let everyone know everything. Follow you out on social media, man.
On Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS.
And, of course, I am at Jason_Foy. And that is going to do it for this edition of the MLB Early Bird Podcast, which is sponsored by Yahoo.